Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The fluorescent lights hummed with an almost hypnotic frequency in the basement conference room of the J. Edgar Hoover building. Special Agent Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her fingers against her temples, staring at the crime scene photographs scattered across the mahogany table like a macabre tarot spread. Each image told the same impossible story. Victims found in mathematically precise positions, their bodies arranged according to Bradley consulted his notes. Boston, 397 miles. Princeton, 203 miles. Philadelphia, 141 miles. Baltimore, 37 miles. Each scene is approximately half the distance from NIST as the previous one. He's closing in, Rodriguez said grimly, working his way towards something specific. Sarah stood abruptly, her chair rolling backward. We need to contact Dr. Michael Thornton at NIST immediately. If our killer is following this pattern, Dr. Thornton might be the ultimate target. The phone call to NIST revealed disturbing news. Dr. Michael Thornton, the lead scientist on a classified quantum encryption project, had reported several break-in attempts at his home laboratory over the past month. Each time, nothing appeared to be stolen, but his research materials had been subtly rearranged. The local police had attributed it to neighborhood pranks. Dr. Thornton is under federal protection as of now, Rodriguez announced after ending the call. I've arranged for a protective detail from the Washington field office, but I want our team on scene to interview him. If we're right about this pattern, we might finally have a chance to get ahead of this killer. The drive to Gaithersburg, Maryland, took 43 minutes through late afternoon traffic. Dr. Thornton's residential laboratory occupied the converted basement of his modest colonial home, a space filled with equipment that looked more like science fiction than reality. Quantum computers required temperatures colder than deep space, achieved through elaborate cooling systems that hummed constantly in the background. Dr. Thornton himself appeared younger than his 52 years, with prematurely gray hair and the intense focus of someone accustomed to working with concepts that existed at the edge of human understanding. He wore a rumpled lab coat over jeans and a t-shirt that read, "Schrodinger's cat, wanted dead and alive." The break-in started about 6 weeks ago, Dr. Thornton explained, leading the agents through his laboratory. Never any obvious theft, but someone with advanced knowledge had definitely been here. Equipment calibrated slightly differently, research notes placed in the wrong order. Whoever it was understood quantum computing well enough to cover their tracks. Sarah examined the laboratory carefully, noting the sophisticated security system and the lack of obvious entry points. Dr. Thornton, what exactly is the nature of your classified research? The physicist hesitated, glancing at the federal protective agents stationed near the laboratory entrance. Quantum cryptography. We're developing encryption methods that would be theoretically unbreakable, even by quantum computers. The implications for national security are significant. Significant enough to kill for? Bradley asked. The research I'm conducting could render every current encryption method obsolete overnight, Dr. Thornton admitted. Financial systems, military communications, intelligence networks, everything would be vulnerable. But it could also provide perfect security for the first time in human history, depending on who controls the technology. Sarah felt the pieces of the puzzle beginning to align. Dr. Thornton, I need you to think carefully. Have you noticed anyone unusual in your professional circles recently? Someone asking detailed questions about your work? Perhaps appearing at conferences or research meetings? The physicist considered this for a long moment. There was someone at the Quantum Computing Symposium in Arlington last month. Dr. Richard Kellerman, claimed to be from a private research firm in California, asked very specific questions about my encryption protocols. Something about him seemed off. Bradley was already on his phone, running the name through the FBI database. Within minutes, he had disturbing news. No Dr. Richard Kellerman registered with any quantum computing firm in California. But there is a Richard Kellerman with a PhD in quantum physics from Caltech, former NSA contractor who was dismissed 3 years ago for unauthorized access to classified materials. What kind of access, Roa? Rodriguez asked. Quantum cryptography research. Specifically, attempts to download Dr. Thornton's preliminary research papers from secure government servers. The room fell silent, except for the humming of the quantum computer cooling systems. They had their suspect. I need everything you have on Kellerman, Sarah said. Employment history, financial records, psychological evaluations from his NSA clearance, and I want surveillance on every quantum computing facility within 100 miles of D.C. The FBI's rapid response was impressive even by federal standards. Within 2 hours, they had assembled a comprehensive profile of Dr. Richard Kellerman, brilliant quantum physicist, former NSA contractor, dismissed for attempting to steal classified research. Financial records showed mounting debts and connections to several foreign technology firms with questionable ties to hostile nations. More disturbing were the psychological evaluations from his security clearance review. Dr. Kellerman exhibited signs of narcissistic personality disorder combined with an obsessive need for recognition. His colleagues described him as brilliant but unstable, someone who believed his intellectual capabilities made him superior to normal moral constraints. Classic profile for this type of killer, Sarah explained to the assembled task force. Highly intelligent, feels intellectually superior to others, justifies violence as serving a higher purpose. The quantum physics angle appeals to his sense of operating on a level beyond normal human understanding. The breakthrough came at 11:47 p.m. when surveillance teams spotted a figure attempting to break into the Georgetown University physics laboratory. Dr. Kellerman had shaved his head and grown a beard since his NSA photo, but facial recognition software confirmed his identity with 97.3% certainty. He's going for Dr. Patricia Wells, Bradley reported, consulting the faculty directory. Quantum entanglement research published several papers on theoretical applications to communication systems. The tactical team moved with practiced precision. FBI SWAT surrounded the physics building while negotiators attempted to establish communication with Kellerman. Through thermal imaging, they could see him in the laboratory with Dr. Wells, who appeared to be unconscious but alive. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Agent Chen, I know you're studying my work. You understand the mathematical precision, the quantum elegance. Meet me in the laboratory. Come alone, or Dr. Wells dies. He's been monitoring our communications, Rodriguez said grimly, probably intercepting our radio traffic. I'm going in, Sarah announced. Absolutely not. We have protocols. Our protocols don't account for someone who understands quantum mechanics well enough to predict our tactical responses, Sarah interrupted. He's been 3 steps ahead of us this entire time because we're thinking like traditional law enforcement. He's thinking like a quantum physicist. Against direct orders, Sarah approached the physics building alone, her service weapon holstered but accessible. The lobby was dark except for emergency lighting that cast eerie shadows across the walls. She found Dr. Kellerman in the main laboratory, standing over Dr. Wells, who was bound but conscious, a small device attached to her neck. Dr. Kellerman appeared older than his 43 years, with intense eyes that seemed to look through rather than at her. He wore surgical gloves and carried a small leather case that presumably contained his killing instruments. "Agent Chen," he said without turning around. "Stanford Ph.D., behavioral psychology, specialization in high-intelligence serial offenders. You've been trying to understand the quantum nature of my work." "Dr. Kellerman," Sarah replied carefully, maintaining distance but positioning herself between him and the exit. "I understand you feel your research was stolen, that you weren't given proper recognition for your contributions." "Recognition?" Kellerman laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "This isn't about recognition, Agent Chen. This is about evolution. Quantum mechanics teaches us that observation changes reality. By eliminating these researchers, I'm not just killing individuals. I'm collapsing their quantum potential, redirecting the timeline of human technological development." Sarah felt a chill of understanding. "You believe you're changing the course of history by controlling who lives and dies." "I know I am," Kellerman corrected. "Each death eliminates certain quantum possibilities while strengthening others. By removing Dr. Thornton's research team, I ensure that quantum cryptography develops along specific lines. Lines that serve the highest bidder rather than the American government." "Which foreign government are you working for?" "You still don't understand," Kellerman said, finally turning to face her. "I'm not working for any government, I'm working for the future itself. Quantum mechanics proves that all possible futures exist simultaneously until the moment of observation. I'm simply choosing which future becomes reality." Dr. Wells made a muffled sound behind her gag. Sarah could see the device on her neck was some kind of remotely triggered injector, probably containing the same paralytic agent used on the other victims. "The silicon carbide found at the crime scenes," Sarah said, stalling for time while the tactical team moved into position. "You're harvesting quantum computing materials. Building something beautiful," Kellerman confirmed. "A quantum computer capable of breaking any encryption, penetrating any security system. With it, I can observe any quantum state, collapse any possibility into the reality I choose, including whether Dr. Wells lives or dies. Her quantum state is already determined by your choices, Agent Chen. Remove your weapon and place it on the laboratory table. Any deviation from these instructions collapses her wave function into death." Sarah hesitated, her training warring with her desire to save Dr. Wells. In that moment of uncertainty, she realized something crucial about Kellerman's psychology. His obsession with quantum mechanics wasn't just intellectual. It was a coping mechanism for someone who felt powerless in normal human interactions. "You're wrong about quantum mechanics," Sarah said suddenly. Kellerman's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me? Heisenberg's uncertainty principle doesn't apply to macroscopic systems like human beings. You can't predict or control human behavior using quantum equations. That's why you've been surprised by our investigation methods, why you didn't anticipate our geographic profiling. You're attempting to destabilize my psychological framework," Kellerman observed, crude but predictable. "I'm pointing out that your entire worldview is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of physics," Sarah continued. "Quantum effects don't scale up to human consciousness. You're not controlling reality. You're just a serial killer with delusions of intellectual grandeur." The psychological blow struck home. Kellerman's carefully controlled demeanor cracked, revealing the unstable personality beneath. His hand moved toward the device controlling Dr. Wells' injector, but Sarah was already in motion. The tactical team burst through the laboratory window simultaneously as Sarah tackled Kellerman, her hand closing around the remote device before he could trigger it. The struggle lasted only seconds before SWAT officers had Kellerman restrained, and Dr. Wells was being freed by FBI medics. "You don't understand," Kellerman mumbled as they led him away in the handcuffs. "The quantum possibilities. I was so close to controlling them all." The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Kellerman's activities. Hidden in his apartment, agents discovered a sophisticated quantum computer built from materials harvested from his victims' laboratories. The device was capable of breaking most current encryption methods, confirming fears about the national security implications. More disturbing were Kellerman's detailed journals, which outlined plans to assassinate dozens of quantum physicists worldwide. He had been selling stolen research to multiple foreign intelligence agencies while building toward his ultimate goal of controlling global quantum computing development. Dr. Michael Thornton's protective detail was maintained for 6 months, while Kellerman underwent psychological evaluation. The physicist eventually completed his quantum cryptography research under heavy security, providing the United States with unbreakable encryption capabilities just as Kellerman had feared. During Kellerman's trial, Sarah testified about the psychological profile that had helped capture him. The defense argued that his brilliant mind had been corrupted by the incomprehensible nature of quantum mechanics, driving him to seek control through violence. The prosecution countered that intelligence was no excuse for murder, regardless of how sophisticated the killer's delusions might be. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Dr. Richard Kellerman was sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole, where he would spend his remaining years unable to observe or control anything beyond the walls of his cell. Sarah stood in the courthouse steps afterward, breathing the cold November air and watching leaves spiral down from the trees according to simple Newtonian physics, rather than quantum uncertainty. The case had taught her something important about the nature of intelligence and evil, that brilliance could be as dangerous as ignorance when combined with moral blindness. The quantum killer case became a landmark study in the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, demonstrating how traditional profiling techniques could be adapted to catch highly intelligent perpetrators operating in specialized fields. Sarah's insight about the killer's misunderstanding of quantum mechanics had been crucial in breaking down his psychological defenses. 6 months later, Sarah received a letter postmarked from the federal penitentiary where Kellerman was serving his sentence. The envelope contained a single sheet of paper covered with complex mathematical equations, topped with a simple message. "The quantum possibilities still exist, Agent Chen. Observation merely delays the inevitable." Sarah filed the letter in the case folder and locked it away. Some minds, she had learned, were too dangerous to engage with, regardless of their intellectual capabilities. In the basement conference room of the J. Edgar Hoover building, the fluorescent lights continued their hypnotic humming, and new case files waited to be opened. The quantum killer had been caught, but somewhere in the vast uncertainty of human behavior, other monsters were already calculating their next moves. Sarah Chen returned to her work, knowing that the pursuit of justice required constant vigilance against those who would use their intelligence to justify the unjustifiable. In quantum mechanics, all possibilities exist until the moment of observation. In criminal investigation, Sarah had learned, the observer's job was to collapse those possibilities into justice. The surveillance photo was grainy, taken from a highway overpass at 2:17 a.m. But Special Agent Maya Rodriguez could make out enough details to confirm her worst fears. The 18-wheeler bore legitimate commercial markings for a produce distribution company, but thermal imaging revealed the truck's refrigerated trailer contained 23 human heat signatures, people being transported like cargo through the darkness of Interstate 40. Maya stared at the image on her laptop screen, her coffee growing cold in the pre-dawn stillness of the FBI's Memphis field office. She had been tracking this particular vehicle for 6 days across 4 states, following a digital breadcrumb trail that suggested a human trafficking operation of unprecedented scope and sophistication. Agent Rodriguez? The voice belonged to Supervisory Special Agent James Sullivan, whose weathered face showed the strain of coordinating a multi-state investigation that seemed to grow more complex with each passing hour. The tactical team is in position. We can intercept the truck at the way station in 15 minutes. Maya closed her laptop and checked her service weapon. After 8 years investigating human trafficking for the Bureau, she had learned to prepare for the worst while hoping for something better. The people in that truck had likely been transported for days without adequate food, water, or sanitation, if they were still alive. "What's our backup situation?" Maya asked as they walked toward the FBI's command vehicle. "Local law enforcement is standing by, but we're keeping this operation federal. If this truck is part of the network we think it is, we can't risk local corruption compromising the investigation." Maya understood the implication. Human trafficking networks often corrupted local officials, from small-town police officers to county judges. The FBI had learned to compartmentalize sensitive operations until they could determine who could be trusted. The Interstate 40 way station sat empty at 3 a.m., except for the FBI tactical vehicles positioned strategically around the facility. Maya watched through night vision binoculars as the 18-wheeler approached, its headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness like lighthouse beams searching for safe harbor. The truck driver appeared to be following standard protocols as he pulled into the way station and began preparing for the mandatory inspection. Nothing in his behavior suggested he knew federal agents were waiting for him. Driver appears to be Hispanic male, approximately 35 years old, reported Special Agent Kevin Park through the tactical radio network. Vehicle papers show destination as Atlanta, originating from El Paso. Driver has valid commercial license under the name Miguel Santos. Maya felt the familiar tension that preceded high-stakes arrests. Any signs that he knows we're here? Negative. He's going through normal way station procedures. The arrest happened quickly and professionally. FBI agents surrounded the truck as the driver stepped out to check his cargo, their weapons drawn but not aimed directly at him. Miguel Santos raised his hands immediately, his face showing resignation rather than surprise. "Miguel Santos, you're under arrest for human trafficking," Maya announced as she handcuffed him. "You have the right to remain silent." But Maya's attention was focused on the truck's trailer, where thermal imaging had detected 23 human beings in conditions that violated every principle of human dignity. The sound that emerged when agents opened the trailer doors would haunt her for months, a collective gasp of fear and desperation from people who had been reduced to cargo. The victims were predominantly young women and teenage girls, though the group also included several young men and 2 children who appeared to be younger than 10 years old. They had been transported in a modified refrigerated trailer with minimal ventilation, no sanitation facilities, and barely enough space for each person to sit. "Medical teams, we need you now," Maya called into her radio as she surveyed the human devastation before her. Several victims appeared to be suffering from dehydration and hypothermia, while others showed signs of physical abuse that suggested systematic violence. The breakthrough in the investigation came from an unexpected source: financial intelligence analysis conducted by the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Special Agent Lisa Park discovered that the Phantom Network was laundering its profits through a complex web of legitimate businesses. They're not just running a trafficking operation, Park reported during the task force briefing. They're running a criminal conglomerate. Restaurants, construction companies, agricultural operations, even some technology firms, all apparently legitimate businesses that serve as fronts for trafficking operations. Maya examined the financial flowcharts. So, they're using legitimate businesses to launder trafficking profits while also providing cover for their operations. Exactly. A construction company can move people around without suspicion. Restaurants can employ trafficking victims as unpaid labor. Agricultural operations can house large numbers of people in remote locations. And the technology firms. This is where it gets really sophisticated. They're using technology companies to develop apps and websites that facilitate trafficking operations while appearing to provide legitimate services. The technological aspect of the Phantom Network's operations represented a new evolution in human trafficking. FBI cyber specialists discovered that the organization was using encrypted messaging apps, cryptocurrency transactions, and sophisticated databases to manage their human inventory. They're treating people like inventory in a warehouse management system, reported Special Agent Jennifer Walsh from the FBI's Cyber Division. Each victim has a digital profile with information about their skills, physical characteristics, and exploitation potential. The system even tracks which victims are most profitable in different types of exploitation. Maya felt sick as she reviewed the digital evidence. They've industrialized human trafficking. It gets worse. The system includes functionality for product customization, modifying victims through surgery, drug treatment, or psychological conditioning to meet specific customer requirements. The investigation expanded to include FBI field offices in 12 states as agents worked to map the full scope of the Phantom Network's operations. The picture that emerged was of a criminal organization that had successfully combined traditional trafficking methods with modern technology and business practices. Major raid operations were conducted simultaneously across 8 states, targeting the network's recruitment centers, transportation hubs, and exploitation facilities. The coordination required unprecedented cooperation between federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies. Maya led the team that raided a Phantom Network facility disguised as an agricultural processing center in rural Arkansas. The complex appeared to be a legitimate food packaging operation, but hidden sections of the facility housed nearly 200 trafficking victims in conditions that violated every standard of human decency. "This is Agent Rodriguez," Maya called into her radio as the tactical team secured the facility. "We have approximately 200 victims requiring immediate medical attention and protective services. Most appear to be in severe psychological distress." The victims at the Arkansas facility had been forced to work 18-hour shifts processing food products for legitimate grocery chains, with their wages confiscated to pay fabricated debts that kept growing larger rather than smaller. Many had been working in the facility for over 2 years without any contact with the outside world. Among the victims was Maria Santos, a 24-year-old woman from Guatemala who had been lured to the United States with promises of legitimate employment as a housekeeper. Instead, she had been sold to the Phantom Network and forced into agricultural labor under conditions that amounted to modern slavery. "They told us we owed money for transportation and housing," Maria explained through a Spanish interpreter. "But no matter how much we worked, the debt kept growing. They said if we tried to leave, they would find our families and hurt them." Maya interviewed dozens of victims over the following weeks, and their stories revealed the systematic psychological manipulation used by the Phantom Network to maintain control. victims were isolated from the outside world, told that law enforcement would arrest them as illegal immigrants, and threatened with violence against their families if they attempted to escape. The technological evidence recovered during the raids provided unprecedented insight into the network's operations. FBI analysts discovered databases containing detailed profiles of over 5,000 trafficking victims, financial records showing profits in excess of $200 million annually, and communications revealing the network's expansion plans into new geographic markets. Most disturbing were the customer databases, which showed that the Phantom Network services were being purchased by individuals and organizations across the United States and internationally. The buyers included private individuals seeking domestic workers, agricultural businesses looking for cheap labor, and criminal organizations involved in other forms of exploitation. "We're not just dealing with the supply side of human trafficking," Maya reported to FBI leadership. "We're dealing with a sophisticated market that connects suppliers with buyers across multiple industries and criminal enterprises." The arrests of Phantom Network leadership revealed the organization's origins and structure. The network had been founded by Carlos Mendoza, a former Mexican military officer who had applied counterinsurgency tactics to criminal operations. His organization combined the cellular structure of terrorist networks with the profit-driven efficiency of legitimate businesses. Mendoza himself was captured during a raid on a luxury compound in Southern California that served as the network's operational headquarters. The facility contained sophisticated communications equipment, detailed maps of trafficking routes, and evidence of corruption among law enforcement officials in multiple states. "Agent Rodriguez," Mendoza said during his initial interrogation, "you think you've solved something by arresting me, but you've only found one small part of a much larger system. There are dozens of networks like ours operating throughout the Americas. We're a business responding to market demand. Market demand for human slavery, market demand for cheap labor, sexual services, and human biological materials. As long as Americans want these things at prices that legitimate businesses can't provide, organizations like ours will exist to supply them." Maya had heard similar justifications from other traffickers, but Mendoza's matter-of-fact description of human exploitation as a business model was particularly chilling. The trial of Carlos Mendoza and 37 other Phantom Network defendants became one of the largest human trafficking prosecutions in U.S. history. The proceedings revealed the full scope of the organization's operations and the systematic nature of their crimes against human dignity. During her testimony, Maya described the investigation and the conditions in which trafficking victims had been held. "The defendants didn't just commit crimes against individuals," she told the court. "They created an industrial system for the exploitation of human beings, treating people as inventory to be bought, sold, and consumed." Mendoza was sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole, while other network members received sentences ranging from 15 to 40 years. But Maya knew that dismantling the Phantom Network was only the beginning of a much larger fight against human trafficking. The investigation had revealed that human trafficking was evolving from opportunistic criminal activity into sophisticated business operations that used technology, legitimate businesses, and corruption to maintain their activities. The profits were enormous, the risks were relatively low, and the demand for trafficked persons continued to grow. Maya was promoted to supervisory special agent and assigned to lead the FBI's new transnational human trafficking task force, which was created in response to the lessons learned from the Phantom Network investigation. Her team worked to develop new strategies for combating trafficking organizations that operated with corporate-level sophistication. 6 months after Mendoza's conviction, Maya received an encrypted message on her secure FBI communication system. The sender was anonymous, but the message was brief and chilling. The Phantom Network was just the beginning. New networks are already operating. The market demands it. Maya immediately initiated protocols for investigating the threat, but she knew that somewhere in the shadows, other criminal organizations were studying the Phantom Network's successes and failures, developing their own versions of industrialized human trafficking. The case had taught her that human trafficking was not just a crime. It was a form of modern slavery that thrived in the intersections between legitimate and criminal economies. The fight against trafficking required not just law enforcement action, but fundamental changes in how society addressed the demand for cheap labor, sexual services, and other forms of human exploitation. In her new role, leading the Transnational Human Trafficking Task Force, Maya worked with international partners to develop strategies for combating trafficking networks that operated across multiple countries and jurisdictions. But she also knew that the most important work happened at the local level, where communities could identify and report suspicious activities that might indicate trafficking operations. The faces of the trafficking victims she had rescued haunted Maya's dreams, particularly the 12-year-old girl who had asked about her mother. Many of the victims had been successfully reintegrated into society or reunited with their families, but others remained traumatized by their experiences and struggled to rebuild their lives. Maya kept a photograph of that young girl on her desk as a reminder of why the work mattered. Human trafficking represented the absolute worst of human nature, the willingness to treat other people as property to be bought, sold, and exploited. But the investigation had also revealed the best of human nature in the form of law enforcement officers, prosecutors, social workers, and ordinary citizens who were willing to fight for the dignity and freedom of people they had never met. The Phantom Network had been dismantled, but Maya knew that other networks were already emerging to take its place. The fight against human trafficking would continue for as long as there were people willing to exploit others and consumers willing to benefit from that exploitation. In the end, the Phantom Network case had demonstrated that human trafficking was not a problem that could be solved through law enforcement alone. It required a comprehensive response that addressed the economic, social, and legal factors that made trafficking possible. Maya Rodriguez continued her work hunting these predators, knowing that each victim rescued and each trafficker arrested brought the world one step closer to a future where human dignity would be respected and protected. The Phantom Networks that enslaved people in plain sight would continue to operate until society decided that human freedom was more important than cheap goods and services. Maya stood guard against these threats, a sentinel watching for the telltale signs that people were being treated as property in a world that claimed to value human rights above all else. The first sign that something was catastrophically wrong came at 6:23 a.m. when every traffic light in downtown Seattle turned green simultaneously. Within minutes, the city's emergency dispatch center was flooded with reports of accidents, near misses, and gridlocked intersections as confused drivers tried to navigate roads where traffic control had simply ceased to exist. Special Agent Alex Chen was pouring her second cup of coffee in the FBI's Seattle field office when her secure phone erupted with an urgent alert from the Cyber Division's emergency response team. The message was brief but chilling. Multiple critical infrastructure systems compromised. All hands to CyberOps immediately. Alex had spent the last 8 years investigating cybercrime for the Bureau, from simple fraud cases to sophisticated nation-state attacks on government networks. But as she raced through the corridors toward the FBI's Cyber Operations Center, she had a sinking feeling that whatever was happening in Seattle was unlike anything she had encountered before. The CyberOps Center occupied an entire floor of the federal building, its walls lined with massive displays showing real-time network traffic, threat intelligence feeds, and system status indicators for critical infrastructure across the Pacific Northwest. Today, those displays painted a picture of chaos. Supervisory Special Agent Maria Santos met Alex at the security checkpoint, her usually composed demeanor strained with barely controlled urgency. "We've got simultaneous attacks on multiple systems," Santos explained as they entered the restricted area. "Traffic management, power grid monitoring, water treatment facilities, and emergency services dispatch. Someone is systematically targeting Seattle's infrastructure." Alex studied the main display, where a map of the city showed compromised systems in angry red dots. Coordinated attack? Has to be. The timing is too precise to be coincidental, but here's what's really disturbing. The attacks aren't following any known pattern. Each system was breached using completely different methods, different malware signatures, different command and control protocols. Special Agent David Kim looked up from his workstation, where streams of code scrolled past at inhuman speeds. As the FBI's lead digital forensics expert, Kim had developed a reputation for tracking cybercriminals through the most sophisticated attempts at digital camouflage. "Alex, this isn't just different attack vectors," Kim said, his voice tight with professional confusion. "These attacks are using vulnerabilities that shouldn't exist. I'm seeing exploitation of zero-day flaws in systems that were supposedly air-gapped from the internet." "Air-gapped systems can't be hacked remotely," Alex said, though even as she spoke the words, she realized how naive they sounded given what was happening around them. "That's what we thought," Kim replied. "But someone has found a way to bridge those gaps. They're attacking systems that were designed to be unhackable." The next update came from the Seattle Police Department's Cyber Crimes Unit. Detective Lieutenant Robert Hayes appeared on the secure video link, his face grim with the weight of citywide crisis management. "Agent Santos, we've got a new development," Hayes reported. "The attacks aren't random vandalism. Someone is using the compromised systems to cover a sophisticated heist. While we've been dealing with traffic chaos and power outages, thieves hit the Federal Reserve Bank's Seattle branch processing center." Alex felt her blood turn cold. "How much?" "Preliminary estimates suggest over $50 million in electronic transfers were initiated during the infrastructure attacks. The chaos provided perfect cover for financial crimes." Santos turned to Alex, her expression deadly serious. "This isn't terrorism or foreign espionage. This is the most sophisticated criminal operation we've ever encountered. Someone used cyber attacks on critical infrastructure as a diversion for financial theft." The implications were staggering. If criminals could coordinate attacks on multiple infrastructure systems while simultaneously conducting financial heists, they represented a new category of threat that traditional law enforcement was ill-equipped to handle. "I need to see the attack vectors," Alex said, moving to an available workstation. If these systems were supposedly secure, someone had inside knowledge of their vulnerabilities. Kim pulled up technical analyses of the various attacks. "Look at this. The traffic management system was compromised through a firmware update that contained malicious code, but that firmware was digitally signed by the manufacturer and appeared completely legitimate. Someone compromised the software supply chain," Alex realized. "They didn't just hack the systems, they poisoned them at the source." "Gets worse," Kim continued. "The power grid attack used credentials that belonged to a maintenance contractor who died 6 months ago. The water treatment facility was breached using administrative passwords that were supposedly changed last week." Alex studied the evidence, her analytical mind processing the implications. This isn't opportunistic cybercrime. Someone has been planning this operation for months, maybe years. They've infiltrated multiple organizations, compromised supply chains, and gathered intelligence on systems that most people don't even know exist. A new alert flashed across the main display. "Secondary attacks detected." Portland, Oregon, Santos cursed under her breath. It's spreading. Maria, get me direct lines to the Portland field office and the Oregon Cybercrimes Task Force. Alex, I want you on the next flight to Portland. If we're dealing with a coordinated campaign, we need to get ahead of it before it spreads further. The flight to Portland took 57 minutes, during which Alex reviewed everything the FBI knew about infrastructure cyber attacks. Most previous incidents had been attributed to foreign nation-states testing American vulnerabilities or domestic terrorists trying to cause maximum disruption. But the Seattle attacks were different. Too sophisticated for typical terrorists. Too financially motivated for state-sponsored operations. Portland's FBI field office buzzed with activity as federal agents coordinated with local law enforcement and private sector security teams. The attacks there had followed a similar pattern. Simultaneous breaches of multiple critical systems followed by sophisticated financial crimes during the resulting chaos. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh met Alex at the airport, her laptop bag bulging with forensic evidence from the Portland attacks. Same playbook as Seattle, Walsh reported as they drove toward downtown. Infrastructure attacks providing cover for financial theft. But the criminals made a mistake here. They left behind digital evidence. What kind of evidence? Custom malware with debugging information still embedded in the code. The programmers forgot to strip out development comments before deploying their attacks. Alex felt a surge of hope. In her experience, even the most sophisticated cyber criminals occasionally made mistakes that revealed their identities. What did the comments say? References to something called Project Mirror. Development timeline suggesting this has been in progress for over 2 years, and most importantly, code comments in Russian, Mandarin, and English. International operation? That's what we thought initially. But the linguistic analysis suggests something different. The Russian and Chinese comments appear to be deliberate misdirection. Grammatical errors that native speakers wouldn't make, but that would fool automated analysis tools. Alex understood immediately. Someone is trying to make this look like foreign intelligence operations to throw off our investigation. The Portland field office's cyber crimes unit had been working around the clock to analyze the attack vectors and trace the financial transfers. Their findings painted a picture of unprecedented criminal sophistication. The malware used in Portland shares code signatures with known nation-state tools, explained Special Agent Robert Chen, the local cybercrimes coordinator. But the implementation is different. Someone reverse-engineered sophisticated attack tools and modified them for criminal purposes. Alex studied the technical analysis. That requires significant resources and expertise. We're not dealing with typical cyber criminals. Here's what's really interesting, Chen continued, pulling up financial transaction records. The stolen funds weren't transferred to overseas accounts like we'd expect. They were moved through a complex network of domestic shell companies and cryptocurrency exchanges, all registered in the United States. Domestic operation using foreign techniques to avoid suspicion, Alex concluded. But who has the resources to develop this kind of capability? The answer came from an unexpected source. The National Security Agency's Cyber Threat Intelligence Center contacted the FBI with information that changed the entire investigation. NSA analyst Dr. Rebecca Foster appeared on secure video link from Fort Meade, her expression grave with the weight of classified intelligence. Agent Chen, we've been monitoring the infrastructure attacks as potential national security threats. Our analysis suggests these aren't foreign operations. They're domestic crimes using tools developed by a former NSA contractor. Alex felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to align. What kind of contractor? Advanced Persistent Threat Simulation. We hire private companies to test our own infrastructure defenses using the same techniques that foreign adversaries might employ. One of those contractors, Prometheus Security Solutions, lost its government clearance 8 months ago due to security violations. What kind of violations? Unauthorized retention of classified attack tools, attempts to reverse engineer government malware, and evidence that they were developing commercial versions of nation-state capabilities. Alex realized they were dealing with something far more dangerous than typical cybercrime. So, Prometheus has access to NSA-level attack tools, and they're using them for criminal purposes. It gets worse, Dr. Foster continued. Prometheus Security Solutions was founded by Dr. Marcus Webb, a former NSA computer scientist who worked on some of our most classified cyber warfare programs. If he's turned those capabilities toward criminal enterprises, he represents an unprecedented threat. The investigation into Dr. Marcus Webb revealed a brilliant computer scientist who had become increasingly isolated and resentful after losing his government security clearance. Financial records showed mounting debts from failed startup ventures and expensive legal battles with the federal government over intellectual property rights. Classic insider threat profile, Alex observed as she reviewed Webb's psychological evaluation files. Highly skilled individual who feels betrayed by the system he once served, with access to tools and knowledge that could cause massive damage. But Webb hadn't acted alone. Financial analysis of Prometheus Security Solutions revealed connections to a network of former government contractors, disaffected federal employees, and international cyber criminals who had formed an unprecedented criminal consortium. They're calling themselves the Mirror Syndicate, Special Agent Walsh reported after analyzing communications intercepts. The idea is that they mirror legitimate government capabilities for criminal purposes, NSA attack tools for infrastructure penetration, CIA social engineering techniques for human intelligence gathering, FBI forensic countermeasures to avoid detection. Alex felt a chill of recognition. They're using everything we taught them against us. The breakthrough in the investigation came when FBI surveillance teams tracked Dr. Webb to a secure facility in rural Oregon that served as the Mirror Syndicate's operational headquarters. The compound appeared to be a legitimate technology research center, but satellite imagery revealed sophisticated communications equipment and power infrastructure that suggested much more intensive operations. "We have a problem," Special Agent Santos announced during the tactical briefing. "The Mirror Syndicate knows we're closing in. NSA intercepts suggest they're planning a final operation, something they're calling the Eclipse Protocol." "What's Eclipse Protocol?" Alex asked. "We don't know, but the communication suggested involves simultaneous attacks on financial infrastructure across multiple states. If they succeed, it could destabilize the entire banking system. The FBI's response involved coordination between multiple field offices, cybercrimes units, and federal agencies. The plan was to conduct simultaneous raids on Mirror Syndicate facilities, while cyber specialists worked to neutralize their attack capabilities before Eclipse Protocol could be implemented. Alex joined the tactical team preparing to raid the Oregon compound. As they approached the facility in unmarked vehicles, her secure phone buzzed with an urgent message from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Multiple banks reporting unauthorized access attempts. Eclipse Protocol appears to be activating. "They started early," Alex told the tactical team leader. "We need to move now." The raid on the Mirror Syndicate compound revealed the scope of their criminal operations. The facility contained dozens of high-end computer workstations, sophisticated communications equipment, and printed materials detailing vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure systems across the United States. Dr. Marcus Webb was arrested in the compound's main server room, where he had been frantically attempting to delete evidence of the syndicate's activities. His laptop contained detailed plans for Eclipse Protocol, which involved coordinated attacks on the banking systems of 12 major cities. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," Webb told Alex as she handcuffed him. "The government taught me to think like an enemy of the United States. I'm just applying those lessons." "For personal profit," Alex replied. "For justice. Do you know how many years I spent developing capabilities to protect this country, only to be discarded when it became politically convenient? The government creates monsters and then acts surprised when they turn around and bite." The digital forensics examination of the Mirror Syndicate's operations revealed the full scope of their criminal activities. Over the past 2 years, they had conducted smaller-scale attacks on dozens of targets, stealing approximately $200 million while testing and refining their techniques. More disturbing was evidence that they had sold their attack tools and methodologies to other criminal organizations, potentially creating dozens of copycat groups with access to nation-state level capabilities. "We're looking at the weaponization of government cyber capabilities," Alex reported to FBI leadership. "The Mirror Syndicate didn't just use these tools for their own crimes, they commercialized them. We could be dealing with this threat for years to come." The trial of Dr. Marcus Webb and the other Mirror Syndicate members became a landmark case in federal cybercrime prosecution. Webb's defense argued that he was using skills and tools provided by the government itself, raising questions about the boundaries between national security capabilities and criminal activities. During her testimony, Alex described the investigation and the unprecedented threat posed by criminal organizations with access to nation-state-level cyber weapons. "The defendants didn't just commit crimes," she told the court. "They industrialized cybercrime, turning government capabilities into commercial products for criminal enterprises." Webb was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, but not before providing detailed information about the Mirror Syndicate's operations and the other criminal groups that had purchased their capabilities. The investigation led to broader reforms in how the government managed contractors with access to classified cyber capabilities. New protocols were implemented to monitor former contractors, prevent unauthorized retention of classified tools, and detect when government capabilities were being misused for criminal purposes. Alex was promoted to supervisory special agent and assigned to lead a new FBI task force focused on preventing the criminal exploitation of government cyber capabilities. Her team worked to identify other potential insider threats and develop countermeasures against criminals using nation-state-level attack tools. 6 months after the Mirror Syndicate arrests, Alex received an encrypted message on her secure email system. The sender was anonymous, but the message was clear. "Project Mirror was just the beginning. We have learned from Webb's mistakes. The next eclipse will be total." Alex immediately initiated protocols for investigating the threat, but she knew that somewhere in the digital shadows, other criminals were studying the Mirror Syndicate's successes and failures, developing their own versions of weaponized government capabilities. The case had taught her that the greatest cyber threats often came not from foreign adversaries, but from trusted insiders who turned their access and knowledge against the systems they had once protected. The tools developed to defend American infrastructure could become the weapons used to attack it, wielded by individuals who understood both the capabilities and the vulnerabilities better than anyone else. In her new role, leading the Insider Threat Investigation Unit, Alex worked to develop psychological profiles of individuals most likely to weaponize their government access for criminal purposes. But she knew that preventing such threats required constant vigilance and the recognition that the enemy might already be inside the gates. The digital shadows that protected criminals were growing darker and more sophisticated, populated by individuals with the highest levels of training and access. Alex Chen continued her work hunting these digital predators, knowing that the next Marcus Webb might already be planning his own version of Project Mirror, learning from the mistakes of his predecessors and preparing to eclipse them all. The war between those who protected American cyber infrastructure and those who sought to exploit it had entered a new phase, where the most dangerous enemies were former allies who carried their knowledge and resentment into the criminal underground. Alex stood guard against these threats, a digital sentinel watching for the telltale signs that someone with the power to protect had chosen instead to destroy. In the end, the Mirror Syndicate case demonstrated that the greatest cybersecurity threats often came from within, from trusted individuals who possessed both the means and the motive to turn their protective capabilities into weapons of mass digital destruction. Alex had helped stop one such threat, but she knew that others were already emerging from the shadows, carrying their government training and classified knowledge into the service of criminal enterprises that grew more sophisticated and dangerous with each passing day. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that would forever change how the Federal Bureau of Investigation protected its most valuable assets. Special Agent Elena Vasquez jerked awake in her Arlington apartment, her phone's shrill ring cutting through the darkness like a scream. The caller ID showed only numbers, a secure line from the FBI's Washington field office. "Vasquez," she answered, already reaching for the clothes she kept folded on her nightstand. "We have a WITSEC breach," came the voice of Assistant Director Frank Morrison, his usually calm demeanor strained with barely controlled urgency. 3 witnesses dead in the last 6 hours. Different states, different identities, all compromised simultaneously. Elena's blood turned to ice water. The Witness Security Program, WITSEC, was supposed to be impenetrable. In over 50 years of operation, fewer than a dozen protected witnesses had been killed while under federal protection, and never in coordinated attacks. Someone had breached the most classified database in federal law enforcement. "I'm on my way," Elena said, pulling on her jacket and holstering her Glock 19. As the FBI's lead investigator for WITSEC integrity, she knew that if the program's security had been compromised, hundreds of witnesses across the country were now sitting ducks. The drive to the Hoover building took 12 minutes through empty D.C. streets. Elena used the time to process what she knew about WITSEC operations. The program relocated approximately 8,500 witnesses and 9,900 family members since its inception, with a success rate that approached statistical perfection. Witnesses received new identities, relocation assistance, and ongoing protection in exchange for testimony against organized crime figures, terrorists, and other dangerous criminals. The security protocols were legendary in their complexity. Only a handful of federal marshals knew the real identities and locations of protected witnesses, and that information was compartmentalized so thoroughly that no single person could access more than a few cases at a time. The computer systems required multiple levels of authorization, biometric verification, and were air-gapped from any external networks. Assistant Director Morrison met Elena in the secure elevator that descended to the FBI's most classified operational center, 3 levels below the building's basement. The WITSEC Command Center occupied a space that resembled mission control at NASA. Dozens of workstations arranged in concentric circles around massive digital displays, showing real-time threat assessments for protected witnesses nationwide. "Talk to me," Elena said as they entered the restricted area. Morrison handed her a tablet containing preliminary reports. Victim 1, Michael Torres, protected witness in the Salvatore crime family prosecution, found shot dead in his Phoenix apartment at 11:30 p.m. local time. Victim 2, Jennifer Walsh, key witness in the Russian trafficking case, killed in her Portland home at 12:45 a.m. Pacific. Victim 3, David Chen, witness in the MS-13 racketeering trial, murdered in his Atlanta safe house at 2:15 a.m. Eastern. Elena studied the timeline, her analytical mind already processing patterns. All killed within a 4-hour window, but the timing suggests coordination across time zones. Someone wanted maximum psychological impact. Gets worse, Morrison continued, leading her to a workstation where FBI cyber specialists were frantically typing commands. We've detected unauthorized access attempts on the WITSEC database from 17 different IP addresses worldwide. The attacks are sophisticated, someone with intimate knowledge of our security protocols. Special Agent Marcus Webb looked up from his computer terminal, his face pale with exhaustion and worry. As the FBI's chief cybersecurity specialist for witness protection, Webb had designed many of the safeguards that were supposedly impenetrable. Elena, we're dealing with someone who knows our systems better than we do, Webb said, his voice tight with professional humiliation. The intrusion attempts are hitting vulnerabilities I didn't even know existed. Whoever this is, they've been studying our protocols for months, maybe years. Elena pulled up a chair next to Webb's workstation. Show me the attack patterns. The computer screen filled with scrolling code that looked like digital hieroglyphics to most people, but Elena had trained herself to read cyber forensics reports. The attack signatures were unlike anything she'd encountered. Sophisticated, but with distinctive characteristics that suggested a specific type of perpetrator. These aren't random hackers or foreign intelligence services, she observed. The techniques are too specialized, too focused on WITSEC specifically. This is someone with inside knowledge. Morrison's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. His face darkened as he read it. We've got a 4th victim, Thomas Kowalski, witness in the Chicago organized crime case. Found dead in his Des Moines apartment 20 minutes ago. That's 4 witnesses in different federal districts, all killed within 5 hours, Elena said, standing abruptly. We're not dealing with a security breach. We're dealing with a coordinated assassination campaign. Someone is systematically eliminating protected witnesses. The implications were staggering. If WITSEC had been compromised, it would undermine decades of federal prosecutions. Witnesses would refuse to cooperate with federal authorities. Ongoing trials would collapse, and organized crime groups would gain a massive advantage over law enforcement. I need access to the personnel files for everyone with WITSEC clearance, Elena said. Current employees, former employees, contractors, anyone who's had access to the database in the past 5 years. Elena, Morrison said quietly, that's over 300 people across multiple agencies. Federal marshals, FBI agents, Justice Department attorneys, database administrators. Then we better get started. The next 6 hours blurred together in a haze of coffee, fluorescent lighting, and mounting dread. Elena's team pulled personnel files, financial records, psychological evaluations, and digital activity logs for every person with WITSEC access. They were looking for someone with the technical skills to breach the database, the criminal connections to orchestrate multiple assassinations, and the motivation to destroy the witness protection program. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Special Agent Lisa Park, a forensic accountant who specialized in tracing financial crimes, discovered an anomaly in the payment records for a database security contractor. Elena, look at this, Park said, highlighting entries on her computer screen. CyberShield Solutions has been doing security audits for WITSEC for the past 3 years. Standard government contract, nothing unusual. But 6 months ago, they submitted invoices for work that doesn't appear in any official records. Helena studied the financial documents. What kind of work? Database penetration testing, security vulnerability assessments, access protocol reviews. All legitimate services. Except there's no corresponding paperwork from the Justice Department authorizing this work. Someone hired CyberShield to map our security vulnerabilities without official approval, Elena realized. Who authorized the payments? Park pulled up personnel records. Deputy U.S. Marshal Robert Kowalski, WITSEC Operations Coordinator for the past 8 years. The name hit Elena like a physical blow. Kowalski? Any relation to Thomas Kowalski, the witness killed in Des Moines? Checking, yes. Robert Kowalski's younger brother Thomas was relocated to Iowa under WITSEC protection 3 years ago after testifying against the Chicago outfit. Helena felt the pieces of the puzzle beginning to align, but the picture they formed was more disturbing than anything she had imagined. Pull everything on Deputy Marshal Kowalski. Financial records, personal communications, travel history, psychological evaluations. I want to know what he had for breakfast every day for the past 6 months. The investigation into Robert Kowalski revealed a federal law enforcement officer slowly consumed by corruption and family loyalty. A decorated deputy marshal with 15 years of exemplary service, Kowalski had begun showing signs of stress and erratic behavior following his brother's entry into WITSEC. Personal financial records revealed mounting gambling debts and several large cash deposits that didn't correspond to his federal salary. Phone records showed frequent calls to numbers associated with the known associates of the Chicago outfit, the same organized crime family his brother had testified against. He's been feeding information to the mob for months, Elena concluded, reviewing the evidence. But why kill his own brother? Special Agent Webb had been monitoring digital communications traffic, looking for patterns that might reveal how the assassinations were coordinated. Elena, I think I know why Thomas Kowalski was killed. Look at this. Webb pulled up encrypted communications that had been intercepted by NSA surveillance systems. The messages were heavily coded, but the timing coincided with the WITSEC database breaches. Someone was testing the system, Webb explained. The first 3 murders were proof of concept, demonstrating that they could identify and eliminate protected witnesses. Thomas Kowalski was killed to send a message to his brother. Complete cooperation or face the consequences. Elena's phone rang with a call from the FBI's Chicago field office. The news was grim, but not unexpected. Deputy Marshal Kowalski didn't report for duty this morning, the Chicago agent reported. His apartment appears to have been abandoned hastily. Neighbors reported seeing him leave around 4 a.m. with several suitcases. He's running, Elena said. But he can't run far with organized crime connections and federal resources hunting him. The manhunt for Robert Kowalski involved every law enforcement agency in the United States. His federal marshal credentials were revoked, his bank accounts frozen, and his photograph distributed to every airport, border crossing, and train station in the country. But Kowalski had advantages that most fugitives lacked. His 15 years in federal law enforcement had taught him how investigations worked, how to avoid surveillance, and how to disappear. More importantly, he had powerful allies who wanted to keep him alive long enough to extract more WITSEC intelligence. The next break in the case came from an unexpected source, Kowalski himself. Elena's secure phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. When she answered, the voice on the other end was tired, frightened, and desperate. Agent Vasquez? This is Robert Kowalski. I think I need to turn myself in. Elena gestured frantically to Webb, who immediately began tracing the call. "Marshal Kowalski, where are you?" "I can't tell you that. They're watching, listening. I thought I could control this, but it's gone too far. They killed my brother to prove a point. They'll kill me as soon as I've outlived my usefulness." "Who's they, Robert?" "You know who. The outfit. Vincent Torino's people. I owed them money, and they offered me a way out. Feed them information about witnesses. Help them settle old scores. I thought it would be a few names, nothing major. But they wanted everything, every witness, every location, every identity." Elena felt sick to her stomach. "How many witnesses are compromised?" "All of them," Kowalski said quietly. "They have the complete WITSEC database, names, locations, new identities, everything. I gave them everything." The line went dead. Elena stared at her phone in horror. If Kowalski was telling the truth, nearly 8,500 protected witnesses were now in mortal danger. The entire federal witness protection program had been compromised by a single corrupt federal marshal. "Did you get a location on the call?" Elena asked Webb. "Triangulated to somewhere in the Detroit metropolitan area, but he's probably using a burner phone and won't stay in one place long." Elena's mind raced through the implications. "We need to implement emergency protocols for every protected witness in the country. New identities, new locations, everything. It's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars and take months to complete." "Elena," Morrison interrupted, "we just received a priority message from the Justice Department. There's been another development." The message contained surveillance photographs from a Detroit hotel security camera. The images showed Robert Kowalski meeting with Vincent Torino, a high-ranking member of the Chicago outfit who had been a federal fugitive for over 2 years. But the most disturbing photograph showed Kowalski handing Torino a laptop computer, presumably containing the complete WITSEC database. "The laptop transfer happened 3 hours ago," Morrison explained. "By now, that information could be anywhere. We have to assume that every protected witness is at immediate risk." Elena authorized the largest witness protection emergency operation in FBI history. Every WITSEC coordinator in the country received emergency orders to immediately relocate their protected witnesses to secure facilities until new identities could be arranged. The operation would involve thousands of federal agents, cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars, and disrupt the lives of innocent families who had already sacrificed everything to help federal prosecutors. The Detroit field office reported that they had located the hotel where Kowalski had met with Torino, but both men had disappeared. A forensic examination of the hotel room revealed evidence of the meeting, but no clues about where either man might have gone. Elena realized that they were dealing with more than just a corrupt federal marshal. Vincent Torino was a sophisticated criminal who had evaded federal authorities for years. If he now possessed the complete WITSEC database, he would use that information strategically rather than simply ordering random assassinations. "He's going to sell the information," Elena concluded. "Not just to the Chicago outfit, but to every organized crime family, terrorist group, and foreign intelligence service willing to pay. This isn't just about settling scores. It's about destroying the federal government's ability to prosecute organized crime." The investigation took a dramatic turn when the Detroit Police Department discovered Vincent Torino's body in an abandoned warehouse near the Detroit River. He had been shot execution style, and the laptop containing the WITSEC database was missing. Torino wasn't the buyer, Elena realized. He was just a middleman. Someone else is behind this operation. Someone with the resources to orchestrate multiple assassinations and eliminate witnesses who might compromise their identity. Special Agent Park had been continuing her financial investigation, tracing the money trail that led to Robert Kowalski's corruption. Her discoveries revealed a web of offshore accounts, shell corporations, and cryptocurrency transactions that pointed to a sophisticated criminal organization. The payments to Kowalski didn't come from the Chicago outfit, Park reported. They came from a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, which received funding from a cryptocurrency exchange in Eastern Europe. We're dealing with an international operation. Elena studied the financial flowcharts, trying to understand the scope of the conspiracy. This isn't organized crime. This is something bigger. International intelligence services, maybe state-sponsored actors. The answer came from an unexpected source: the Central Intelligence Agency. CIA analyst David Kim contacted Elena through secure channels with intelligence that changed everything about the investigation. His agency had been monitoring communications between foreign intelligence services and had detected references to an operation called Broken Shield. Broken Shield is a Russian SVR operation designed to compromise American law enforcement capabilities, Kim explained during a secure video conference. They've been systematically infiltrating federal agencies for years, looking for vulnerabilities in witness protection, counterterrorism operations, and organized crime investigations. Elena felt the pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. Robert Kowalski wasn't corrupted by organized crime. He was recruited by foreign intelligence. The Russians identified him as a vulnerable target: gambling debts, family pressures, access to classified information. They approached him through intermediaries, made it look like organized crime corruption when it was actually espionage. And the assassinations? Proof of concept. Demonstration that they could compromise American witness protection. The real goal was to acquire the complete database and sell that information to every enemy of the United States worldwide. Elena realized they were dealing with a national security crisis that went far beyond law enforcement. If foreign intelligence services possessed the complete WITSEC database, they could eliminate American assets, compromise ongoing investigations, and undermine decades of federal prosecutions. The manhunt for Robert Kowalski intensified with CIA and NSA assistance. Intelligence agencies provided satellite surveillance, communications intercepts, and human intelligence assets to track the rogue federal marshal. The breakthrough came when NSA detected encrypted communications between known Russian intelligence operatives discussing a package delivery scheduled for that evening. The communications suggested that Kowalski was being moved to a secure location for extraction to Russia. They're planning to get him out of the country, Elena told the assembled task force. Once he's in Russia, he'll be beyond our reach, and we'll never know the full extent of the compromise. FBI surveillance teams positioned themselves around 3 possible extraction points based on intelligence analysis: a private airfield in upstate New York, a shipping terminal in Baltimore, and a marina in Norfolk, Virginia. Each location had the infrastructure necessary for covert international transportation. At 11:47 p.m., thermal imaging detected movement at the Norfolk Marina. A small boat was approaching the shore, and heat signatures suggested 2 individuals waiting on the dock. Elena's tactical team moved into position with night vision equipment and suppressed weapons. The boat that approached the marina flew no flags and showed no navigation lights, clearly designed for covert operations. Through her night vision scope, Elena could see Robert Kowalski standing on the dock with a laptop bag and a small suitcase. A man in dark clothing stood beside him, presumably his Russian handler. "This is Agent Vasquez," Elena whispered into her radio. "I have visual confirmation of the subject, moving to intercept." The arrest happened quickly and quietly. Federal agents surrounded the dock before the Russian operative could signal the boat. and Kowalski surrendered without resistance. The laptop bag contained encrypted hard drives with the complete WITSEC database, along with other classified federal law enforcement information. The Russian operative carried diplomatic credentials that proved to be authentic, complicating his detention. The boat that had come to extract them contained sophisticated communications equipment and weapons that confirmed its intelligence purpose. Elena handcuffed Robert Kowalski personally, looking into the eyes of a man who had betrayed everything he had sworn to protect. "How many people are going to die because of what you did?" Kowalski's response was barely audible. "I never meant for Thomas to get hurt. They said they just wanted information about criminals, people who deserved what was coming to them. I didn't know they were going to start killing innocent families. But you kept providing information, even after the murders started. They said they'd kill my wife and children if I stopped. And then they killed Thomas anyway, just to show me they could." Elena felt a mixture of disgust and pity for the broken man before her. Federal marshals were supposed to be incorruptible guardians of justice, but Kowalski had been systematically destroyed by foreign intelligence professionals who understood exactly how to exploit human weaknesses. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of the Russian operation. Broken Shield had been in development for over 5 years, with intelligence operatives carefully studying American law enforcement procedures and identifying potential assets within federal agencies. Robert Kowalski had been one of several federal employees targeted for recruitment, though he was the only one who had provided access to the WITSEC database. Other Russian assets had been developed within the DEA, ATF, and even the FBI itself. The damage assessment took months to complete. 4 protected witnesses had been murdered, the complete WITSEC database had been compromised, and dozens of ongoing federal investigations had been exposed to foreign intelligence services. The cost of protecting and relocating the affected witnesses exceeded $400 million, making it one of the most expensive security breaches in federal law enforcement history. Robert Kowalski pleaded guilty to espionage, conspiracy, and accessory to murder. During his sentencing hearing, he provided detailed information about Russian intelligence operations in exchange for a life sentence rather than the death penalty. Elena testified at the hearing about the investigation and the impact of Kowalski's betrayal on federal law enforcement capabilities. She described how foreign intelligence services had systematically studied American vulnerabilities and exploited them with devastating effectiveness. The defendant's actions didn't just compromise individual cases, Elena told the court. They undermined the entire foundation of federal law enforcement's ability to protect witnesses and prosecute organized crime. The psychological impact on potential witnesses will last for decades. After the trial, Elena was promoted to assistant director of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, where she worked to develop new protocols for protecting classified law enforcement information from foreign intelligence services. The WITSEC program underwent massive reforms, including enhanced background investigations for personnel, improved cybersecurity measures, and compartmentalization of information to prevent single-point failures. But Elena knew that determined adversaries would continue looking for new vulnerabilities to exploit. 6 months later, Elena received a letter from one of the relocated witnesses, a woman whose family had been forced to abandon their new life and start over once again because of the security breach. The woman thanked Elena for the FBI's efforts to protect them, but expressed doubt that her children would ever feel truly safe again. Elena kept the letter in her desk drawer as a reminder of the human cost of betrayal. Federal law enforcement operated on trust. Trust between agents and witnesses. Trust between agencies. Trust in the system itself. Once that trust was broken, it could take generations to rebuild. The Russian operative captured at the Norfolk Marina was eventually exchanged for an American intelligence officer held in Moscow, but not before providing valuable insights into foreign intelligence operations targeting American law enforcement. Elena continued her work protecting federal witnesses and investigating security breaches, knowing that somewhere in the shadows, other intelligence services were studying American vulnerabilities and planning their own versions of Broken Shield. The Witness Protection Program survived the crisis, but it was forever changed. Elena had learned that even the most classified and secure systems were vulnerable to human weakness, and that protecting witnesses required constant vigilance against both criminal organizations and foreign intelligence services. In her new role as assistant director, Elena implemented new training programs to help federal employees recognize and resist foreign intelligence recruitment attempts. But she knew that the next Robert Kowalski might already be out there, slowly being corrupted by patient adversaries who understood that betrayal was often just a matter of finding the right pressure points. The shield that protected federal witnesses had been broken, but Elena Vasquez was determined to forge it anew, stronger, more secure, and better protected against those who would exploit American justice for their own dark purposes. The manila envelope arrived on Special Agent Rebecca Foster's desk with no return address, no postmark, and no indication of how it had bypassed the FBI's stringent mail security protocols at the J. Edgar Hoover building. Inside, a single photograph showed Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Harrison shaking hands with Vincent "Vinny the Fish" Torino, a known associate of the Philadelphia crime family, outside a restaurant in Atlantic City at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Rebecca stared at the image, her coffee growing cold as the implications sank in. Harrison was the lead federal prosecutor in the largest organized crime case in Pennsylvania's history, a RICO prosecution that could send dozens of mob associates to prison for life. If Harrison was compromised, it would destroy years of investigation and allow some of the most dangerous criminals in the country to walk free. The timestamp on the photograph was from 6 days ago. Whoever had sent it wanted the FBI to know that corruption had reached the highest levels of federal law enforcement, and they wanted it known immediately. Agent Foster? The voice belonged to Supervisory Special Agent Thomas Kane, whose 25 years investigating public corruption had left him with an almost supernatural ability to detect deception. The director wants to see you in his office. Now. Rebecca grabbed the photograph and her secure laptop, knowing that whatever was about to happen would define the rest of her career. As the FBI's lead investigator for public corruption cases involving federal prosecutors, she had always known this day might come. The day when someone she had worked alongside, trusted, and respected would be revealed as a traitor to everything the justice system represented. Director William Morrison's office occupied a corner of the 7th floor with views of Pennsylvania Avenue that seemed to symbolize the FBI's oversight of American democracy. Morrison himself was a career law enforcement officer who had risen through the ranks by maintaining absolute integrity in an environment where temptation and compromise were constant threats. Agent Foster, Morrison said without preamble, we may have a problem that goes beyond anything we've encountered before. Show me what you received this morning. Rebecca placed the photograph on Morrison's desk. Anonymous delivery. No chain of custody, but the implications are obvious. If Assistant U.S. Attorney Harrison is compromised, we're looking at the potential collapse of the Philadelphia RICO prosecution. Morrison studied the image with the intensity of someone who understood that corruption in federal law enforcement could undermine public trust in the entire justice system. What do you know about Harrison's background? 15 years as a federal prosecutor, impeccable record, responsible for dozens of successful organized crime prosecutions. If there's corruption here, It's either very recent or very well hidden, or very sophisticated, Morrison added. I want you to run a complete background investigation on Harrison, but do it quietly. If he's innocent, we can't afford to destroy his reputation. If he's guilty, we can't afford to tip him off. Rebecca understood the delicate balance required for investigating federal prosecutors. Too aggressive, and innocent officials would be destroyed by unfounded suspicions. Too cautious, and corrupt officials would have time to cover their tracks and escape justice. What about the Philadelphia RICO case? Continues as scheduled unless we find evidence of actual compromise. But I want surveillance on Harrison starting immediately, and I want financial audits of everyone involved in the prosecution. The investigation into Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Harrison required extraordinary discretion and specialized techniques. Rebecca couldn't use normal FBI surveillance protocols without risking exposure, so she assembled a team of agents with experience in investigating other federal law enforcement officers. Special Agent David Park had spent 8 years in the FBI's Internal Affairs Division before transferring to public corruption investigations. His specialty was detecting behavioral patterns that indicated deception among law enforcement professionals. Harrison's been acting differently over the past 2 months, Park reported after reviewing surveillance footage from the federal courthouse. Longer lunch breaks, more time spent on personal phone calls, and he's been leaving work earlier than usual. Could be innocent explanations for all of that, Rebecca observed. Could be, but there's something else. His assistant mentioned that he's been receiving more personal visitors than usual, and he's been scheduling meetings away from the office more frequently. Special Agent Lisa Chen, a forensic accountant who specialized in tracking corruption-related financial crimes, had been analyzing Harrison's financial records. Her findings raised immediate red flags. Harrison's been making cash deposits that don't correspond to his federal salary, Chen reported. Small amounts, never more than $9,000 to avoid triggering reporting requirements, but they add up to approximately $50,000 over the past 6 months. Rebecca felt her stomach tighten. Source of the money? Unknown. The deposits are always made in cash at different bank branches, and the timing doesn't correspond to any legitimate income sources we can identify. What about his personal expenses? That's where it gets interesting. Harrison recently purchased a new BMW, paid cash for a family vacation to Europe, and made substantial improvements to his home. The total expenditures exceed his annual salary. The financial evidence was damning, but Rebecca knew that proving corruption required more than just unexplained income. She needed to establish a clear connection between Harrison's actions as a prosecutor and the benefits he was receiving. The breakthrough came when FBI surveillance teams observed Harrison meeting with Anthony "Tony the Blade" Marconi, a known organized crime figure who was scheduled to testify as a government witness in the Philadelphia RICO case. The meeting took place in a parking garage in South Philadelphia, far from any legitimate reason Harrison might have for being in that neighborhood. They talked for approximately 15 minutes, reported Special Agent Mark Rodriguez, who had conducted the surveillance from a concealed position. Harrison appeared to be taking notes, and Marconi handed him what looked like a manila envelope. Did you get photographs? Full documentation. But here's what's really disturbing. Marconi is supposed to be in federal protective custody. Harrison arranged for him to be released for this meeting without notifying the U.S. Marshals Service. Rebecca realized they were witnessing active corruption that could compromise the entire RICO prosecution. We need to move fast. If Harrison is feeding information to organized crime figures, every case he's involved in could be compromised. The investigation expanded to include technical surveillance of Harrison's communications. FBI cyber specialists obtained warrants to monitor his phone calls, emails, and text messages, looking for evidence of communication with organized crime figures or their associates. What they discovered was a sophisticated corruption scheme that had been operating for over a year. Harrison had been providing detailed information about federal investigations, witness testimonies, and prosecution strategies to organized crime figures in exchange for substantial cash payments. The intercepted communications revealed that Harrison had compromised multiple cases, not just the Philadelphia RICO prosecution. He had provided advance warning of raids, identified federal informants, and even altered witness statements to benefit criminal defendants. "This is Agent Foster," Rebecca said during an emergency briefing with FBI leadership. "We have evidence that Assistant U.S. Attorney Harrison has been actively sabotaging federal prosecutions for over a year. The damage to ongoing cases could be catastrophic." Director Morrison's response was immediate and decisive. "How many cases are potentially compromised?" Preliminary analysis suggests at least 15 major organized crime prosecutions may have been affected. We're looking at the possible collapse of years of investigative work. And the scope of Harrison's corruption? He's been receiving payments totaling approximately $200,000, but the real damage is in the information he's provided. Witness identities, investigative techniques, evidence collection methods. He's given organized crime figures a roadmap for avoiding federal prosecution. The arrest of Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Harrison required unprecedented coordination between multiple federal agencies. The Justice Department's Office of Inspector General worked with the FBI to ensure that the arrest wouldn't compromise ongoing prosecutions while also preserving evidence of Harrison's corruption. Rebecca led the team that arrested Harrison at his home in suburban Philadelphia at 6 a.m. on a Thursday morning. The arrest warrant charged him with conspiracy, bribery, obstruction of justice, and violating his oath of office. "Michael Harrison, you're under arrest for corruption of federal office," Rebecca announced as she handcuffed the man who had been one of the Justice Department's most trusted prosecutors. "You have the right to remain silent." Harrison's face showed no surprise, only resignation. "I suppose you think you understand what you're doing," he said quietly as agents searched his home. "I understand that you betrayed everything you swore to protect," Rebecca replied. "Do you? Do you understand the pressure, the threats, the impossible choices? Do you think this was about money?" The search of Harrison's home revealed the full scope of his corruption. Hidden in a basement safe, agents discovered detailed files on federal investigations, copies of witness statements, and financial records showing payments from multiple organized crime figures. More disturbing were personal items that suggested Harrison's family had been threatened. Photographs of his wife and children with red X marks drawn across their faces, newspaper clippings about federal prosecutors who had been murdered, and a recording of a phone call in which an unidentified voice described what would happen to Harrison's family if he stopped cooperating. They didn't just corrupt him, Rebecca realized as she reviewed the evidence. They terrorized him into compliance. The interrogation of Michael Harrison revealed the sophisticated methods used by organized crime figures to corrupt federal officials. The process had begun with small favors and minor information sharing, gradually escalating to active sabotage of federal prosecutions. "It started with a simple request," Harrison explained during his confession. "Vincent Torino approached me at a legal conference and asked for general information about how federal prosecutors handle organized crime cases. Academic discussion," he said. "I thought I was helping with legitimate research." When did it become corruption? When they started asking for specific information about ongoing cases. By then, they had photographs of our conversations, recordings of everything I'd said. They told me I was already compromised and that cooperation was my only option. and the threats against your family. They made it clear that refusing to cooperate would have consequences. They knew my children's school schedules, my wife's daily routines, where we lived, where we vacationed. They didn't need to make explicit threats. The message was clear. Rebecca understood how organized crime figures used psychological manipulation to corrupt federal officials. They created situations where officials felt they had no choice but to cooperate, then used that cooperation to justify additional demands. Why didn't you come to the FBI when the threat started? With what? General threats that could never be proven. And by then, I had already provided information that could be used against me. I felt trapped. The investigation revealed that Harrison's corruption was part of a broader organized crime strategy to infiltrate federal law enforcement. Similar approaches had been used to attempt corruption of other prosecutors, FBI agents, and federal judges. Special Agent Chen's financial investigation uncovered a network of shell companies and offshore accounts used to launder bribery payments to federal officials. The money trail led to organized crime figures in Philadelphia, New York, and Chicago, suggesting a coordinated national effort to corrupt federal law enforcement. This isn't just local corruption, Chen reported. We're looking at a systematic attempt by organized crime to compromise federal law enforcement capabilities across multiple jurisdictions. The damage assessment took months to complete. Harrison's corruption had compromised 15 major federal prosecutions, resulting in the dismissal of charges against dozens of organized crime figures. Several federal informants had been exposed and required relocation to protect their safety. Most troubling was evidence that Harrison's information had been shared with other criminal organizations, beyond those that had directly corrupted him. The intelligence he provided had been treated as a commodity, sold and traded among various criminal enterprises. The defendant's attorneys are going to have a field day with this, observed Special Agent Rodriguez during a task force briefing. They'll claim that every prosecution Harrison was involved in was tainted by corruption. Rebecca nodded grimly. And they'll probably be right. We're looking at years of appellate litigation and potentially hundreds of cases being overturned. The trial of Michael Harrison became a landmark case in federal corruption prosecution. The proceedings revealed not only the details of his individual corruption, but also the sophisticated methods used by organized crime to infiltrate federal law enforcement. During her testimony, Rebecca described the investigation and the systemic nature of the corruption scheme. The defendant wasn't just taking bribes, she told the court. He was systematically undermining the federal government's ability to prosecute organized crime, compromising the safety of witnesses and the integrity of the justice system. Harrison's defense argued that he had been coerced into cooperation through threats against his family, and that his actions were motivated by fear rather than greed. While the court acknowledged the psychological pressure he had faced, it also emphasized that federal officials had a duty to report threats and seek protection rather than succumb to corruption. Harrison was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, forfeiture of all assets purchased with bribery proceeds, and permanent disbarment from practicing law. But Rebecca knew that his conviction was only the beginning of addressing the damage his corruption had caused. The Harrison case led to comprehensive reforms in how the Justice Department protected its prosecutors from corruption attempts. New protocols were implemented for reporting threats. Enhanced security measures were provided for federal officials and their families, and additional oversight was established for high-profile prosecutions. Rebecca was promoted to Assistant Director of the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, where she worked to develop new strategies for detecting and preventing corruption among federal officials. Her experience with the Harrison case had taught her that corruption often began with small compromises that escalated into major betrayals. 6 months after Harrison's conviction, Rebecca received an encrypted message on her secure FBI communication system. The sender was anonymous, but the message was brief and disturbing. Harrison was just one of many. The corruption goes deeper than you know. Rebecca immediately initiated protocols for investigating the threat, but she knew that somewhere in the federal law enforcement system, other officials might be facing the same pressures and temptations that had destroyed Michael Harrison's career and reputation. The case had taught her that corruption was not just about individual moral failure. It was about systematic vulnerabilities in how federal officials were protected from criminal influence. Organized crime figures had studied federal law enforcement procedures and developed sophisticated methods for exploiting human weaknesses. In her new role, leading the Public Corruption Unit, Rebecca worked with other federal agencies to identify potential corruption risks and develop countermeasures against criminal influence operations. But she also knew that the most important protection against corruption was individual integrity and the willingness of federal officials to report threats rather than succumb to them. The photograph that had started the investigation remained on Rebecca's desk as a reminder that corruption could emerge anywhere in the federal system. Even the most trusted and respected officials could be vulnerable to criminal influence if the right pressure was applied in the right circumstances. Michael Harrison had been a dedicated prosecutor who made terrible choices when faced with impossible pressures. His corruption had damaged dozens of cases and undermined public trust in federal law enforcement. But it had also revealed vulnerabilities that could be addressed through better training, support, and oversight. Rebecca continued her work hunting corrupt officials and protecting the integrity of federal law enforcement, knowing that the battle against corruption required constant vigilance and the recognition that even good people could make terrible choices when faced with extraordinary pressure. The inside men and women who betrayed their oaths of office represented the greatest threat to federal law enforcement, not because they were inherently evil, but because they occupied positions of trust that made their betrayal especially damaging. Rebecca Foster stood guard against these threats, working to ensure that the federal justice system remained worthy of the public trust it was created to serve. In the end, the Harrison case demonstrated that corruption was not just a crime. It was a cancer that could destroy the foundations of justice itself. Rebecca had helped to remove one source of that cancer, but she knew that others might already be growing in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves and undermine everything that federal law enforcement was supposed to protect.